For decades, we've all been told that carbs are pretty much the foundation of a healthy diet. But what if that's not the whole story? Today, we're going to dig into the science behind what really happens when you cut carbohydrates out of your diet.
So let's just kick things off with a huge question. Do we actually need carbohydrates to be healthy? Do we need them to perform at our best when we exercise? Well, the answer might not be what you think.
And that pretty bold statement comes from Professor Tim Noakes, who's a world-renowned doctor and scientist. His whole argument is that a lot of what we believe about carbs is just fundamentally wrong. And his reasoning, well, that's what we're going to explore right now.
Okay, so to really get his argument, you've got to start with what he calls the 5-gram glucose problem. This is the core idea that everything else, and I mean everything, is built on.
So this number, 5 grams, this is the key. According to Professor Noakes, this is the grand total amount of glucose, sugar, that your entire 5 liters of blood is designed to handle at any one time.
To put that in perspective, 5 grams is just a single teaspoon of sugar. Think about that. That's the tiny, super precise balance your body is constantly, desperately trying to maintain. And this slide it really shows you the problem. A single glass of orange juice can have something like 30 grams of sugar. That is 6 times the amount your entire bloodstream is built to handle. Your body basically sees this as a full-blown crisis.
So how does your body deal with this crisis? Well, it panics. It releases a flood of the hormone insulin. And insulin's main job is to get that extra glucose out of the blood and fast. Its favorite strategy? Turning it into fat and storing it away.
And here's where it gets really important. When this happens over and over and over again, your body's cells can actually start to ignore insulin's signal. They become resistant. This state, which we call insulin resistance, leads to chronically high blood sugar. And it's what Noakes says is the real root of so many of our modern chronic diseases.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what happens if you actually take Noakes' advice and just dramatically cut the carbs? Let's walk through a timeline of what you can probably expect.
In the first few days, you're going to see this rapid drop in weight as your insulin levels plummet. But listen, that's mostly water weight. The real change, according to Noakes, starts kicking in around the 30-day mark. That's when your body becomes fat adapted. It's learning to burn fat for fuel, and your exercise performance gets back to normal. Then from 3 months on out, that adaptation just gets stronger. Your weight loss evens out, and your blood sugar stabilizes.
You heard me mention that term, fat adapted? That is so key to this whole thing. So let's break down the actual mechanism behind this transformation into what Professor Noakes calls a fat burner.
It's basically a 3-step process, and it's surprisingly simple when you think about it. First, you cut your carb intake way down, usually below 50 grams a day. Step 2, with no big glucose spikes, your insulin levels just plummet. And with insulin out of the way, your body can finally unlock its own fat stores. That's step 3, the big switch to using fat as its main fuel.
All right, but let's get to the elephant in the room. For anyone who's active, right? Won't cutting carbs just completely tank my athletic performance? I mean, this is one of the biggest fears people have. Well, according to all of Noakes' research, the answer is a huge, resounding no. His work has actually led him to conclude that high-carb diets don't improve performance at all, and that our dependency on them is basically just a myth we've been told for years.
And this just completely turns that whole idea of a fat-burning zone totally upside down. See, if you're a high-carb eater, your high insulin levels are literally blocking you from burning fat efficiently. But if you're fat adapted, your body is burning fat at all exercise intensities. There's no special zone. In this state, any exercise you do is fat-burning exercise.
Okay, let's tackle the other big one. The one everyone immediately thinks of when you say high-fat diet, cholesterol. Isn't this just a heart attack waiting to happen?
So here's the Noakes take on it. He argues first that the whole link between the fat you eat, cholesterol, and heart disease is based on some really weak science. Second, that all the big studies trying to get people to lower their fat intake, they just haven't worked out. He says heart disease is really an inflammatory problem, and the true driver is insulin resistance and diabetes. From his perspective, the real tragedy here is that the one diet that actually helps diabetes, a low-carb diet, is discouraged because of a misplaced fear of cholesterol.
So when you boil it all down, Professor Noakes' entire argument comes back to this one really challenging idea, that our biology, our very design as humans, was meant to run on fat,
not on carbohydrates.
And that really leaves us with one final question, and this one's for you to think about. Looking at how your own body feels, how it performs day to day, is the way you're currently eating actually designed for your unique biology?